The Art of Happiness. My name is Tamra, and not only am I joined by my lovely co-host Erin, but today we have Abby Eckel, who we'll be interviewing. She's a social media influencer focused on liberating women, mental health, and being equal partners in a relationship. She has a broadcast channel called Empower Her, and we are so excited to have you on today, Abby.
Thank you
welcome.
so much. Yeah, welcome.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining
we
us.
obviously are huge fans of your social media. You talk a lot about like women empowerment, and that's something that we really are trying to create as a culture here in our podcast. But one of the things that we really hone in is self-care through hobbies. So we love to bring on interesting guests and pick their brain about their hobbies and how they got into it and how they use that as tools to continue to improve on self-care. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your hobbies?
Yeah. So, gosh, hobbies are so hard as a mom, you know.
Absolutely.
I feel there's, not enough hours in the day, like for the things that I have to get through, let alone the things that I would just like to do.
Right. Yes.
But when I think after my second was born in 2017, I was working at an agency with my friend in social media. And I worked in social media for 13 years now, 14 years, so forever.
Holy
I
cow,
was working with my friend and I were working with influencers. So we were we were managing influencer marketing for a couple of our pretty big brands. And we were seeing how much we were paying these influencers. And in 2017, this was peak influencer,
yes.
The photos and so we understood what was going into it. But I was I just become a mom for the second time. And I felt like I had so much knowledge that I just wanted to share that nobody shared with me. And I was I told my husband, I was I hated the term influencer because I didn't feel that was what I was trying to do. I was I'm going to start a blog. And he was Okay. I was I'm going to be serious about it. So this is it's going to take up some time, but I'm committed to it. And he was yeah, 100%. I'm going to support you. It took me a while to find my footing, in the blog sense. I was more of I don't want to try to sell you clothes and stuff. That's not
sure.
That I don't shop enough for that. I like thrift shop, so I couldn't really do the to know it and get a kickback from it. But I wrote about what I learned in motherhood, my birth experiences and things like that. And then I think a lot of people in 2020 and the lockdown happened, I got on TikTok for a couple reasons. A lot of my clients were at the time hey, do we need to be on this? And I was honestly, as a social media person, I should probably know this. So I got on just to get my feet wet, better understand what is this? What is this? Am I too old for this? Am I too old to be here?
Feels like it for me.
And I was okay, let's. So I was more of a watcher and a lurker for a while, and then I was this feels natural. I just got on and was yapping, and and people were wow. People really perked their ears up and they were this is interesting and listening. And I was and from there, it's just kind of grown on its own. And that's probably now it's, it's a hobby, but it also brings in a little bit of income, which is nice. It's not something I rely on fully, but it's definitely something I found a lot of fulfillment in as I've grown as a person, as a mom, as a woman, as a wife. So yeah, probably that's my main, I guess you'd call it a hobby. I'd call it a hobby. I don't know.
I think I'd definitely call it a hobby. Yeah. I mean, it probably takes up quite a bit of your extra time. So,
it does.
Yeah, there's not a lot of extra time for other things when you're a busy woman and wife and mom and doing that. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And it sounds like it brings you joy. I mean, I follow you. So just hearing the way you communicate to your audience, you seem like you're committed, you believe in your messages, and you enjoy being that female empowerment that you put out there. So I feel check, hobby.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like you have a very supportive husband, which helps you to do this hobby, this probably all-encompassing hobby. We talk a lot about, so one thing I wanted to touch on with you in one of our episodes, we talked about the gender hobby gap and how traditionally, hobbies take men out of the home, whereas women tend to stay in the home more for their hobbies. And so we've touched on that some in our own personal lives and how we feel our husbands have lots of hobbies, they dabble in lots of things, and we just have never really had that because we are the nurturers, the caregivers. And I guess just do you have any thoughts on that? You feel like that's true?
The pause said it all.
I'm sure you have lots to say about that.
All right, I'm ready for the yap.
Give it to us.
It's so interesting because like I know that this exists. My husband is not that person. He's very introverted. I am an outgoing, like extroverted person. And just given his schedule, honestly, our schedule, like my hobby it is an in the home hobby. I'm not out and about, kind of thing. But if I did want that, I know that that's something that I would go and do. And that it would be like, we're going to figure it out because this is something I want to fulfill. But the gender hobby gap is real, and I've been there. I have friends whose husbands are hunters or golfers and or marathon trainers, and so much of that. God, I don't even know where to begin with like addressing that because that's such a topical issue. What's below that is so much more of those societal gender norms. And I think a lot of times women feeling like they can't do that because one, we don't have the time. Our husbands' hobbies take up a lot of time. And so how do we kind of assert ourselves into, no, I have to fulfill myself in order for me to keep fulfilling my job as a mom, as a wife, as a friend, a daughter, employee, whatever it might be. So it's so hard. But I personally always advocate for women to find fulfillment outside of motherhood. I think we've all been in the position where, you feel like you're coming out of the fog on the other side, a year or two after you have a kid and kind of finding yourself.
Great way to describe it.
And you're like, oh, I am a person. Like, I am still in here. Like, it's me.
Yes. Yes.
There she is.
Definitely.
Like, I'm in there. I have to find her
and
again.
And that takes years to get to that point again.
It does. It really does. And remember, like, oh, I have things that I like that are just, for me. And that's, God, that's so hard because you become so entrenched and engulfed in everything motherhood. And then your kids go to school and you've got, back to school stuff and you've got sports and you've got, whatever else it might be. And you just find yourself kind of at the wayside of fulfilling everybody else's needs and doing things for everybody else. But I think it's so, so important, one, for women to have an income of their own and for women to have a hobby that fulfills them outside of motherhood and wifely duties. But I also understand how difficult that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. And I know that you kind of mentioned this before where you said that women aren't wired differently, they're conditioned differently.
Oh, 100%.
And I think that plays into that hobby gap. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been studies like women's brains and men's brains really aren't that different. You look back in time prehistorically, women weren't just gatherers. We were hunters. Like the research and the data is there. And it's this common misconception that women are natural nurturers. No, women don't have any choice but to be natural nurturers. When a baby comes, the dad takes a step back and it's just like we throw mom into it and we're like, figure it out, mom. And dads are like, oh, dad, go along for the ride. Let mom, kind of teach you. And that's so tiring for moms. It's so exhausting. It's wildly unfair. And it sets women up for a lot of failures and a lot of resentment, a lot of burnout.
Absolutely.
So we're not wired that differently. We're conditioned very, very differently though. And I think about it, I was telling I think I might've been telling a friend, but I was thinking the other day, I need a babysitter. And my first thought is, all right, what girls in the neighborhood are teenagers? And then I'm like, wait a second. Why don't I ever think of a boy in high school? I think of a boy to come mow my lawn or pull my weeds or move some furniture for me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that even runs deep inside me, And
that is a great
so much
example.
Unlearning.
Yes.
But I think what you point out is something that I really hope resonates with our listeners is the fact that like you're self-aware, right? You're self-aware that you also are part of that like conditioning, but you're recognizing it and trying to change that, right? And I think that there's nothing wrong with you awakening to the fact that you're part of that conditioning,
Yeah.
right?
No.
What use
good
that
thing.
to be like a stepping stone to make that change and be that change, right? Because like you talk about like how your partner is like, you guys are truly partners, right? Like you're not asking him permission to go and do a hobby or asking him to help you clean. Like he helps because he's your partner. And I would say Erin and I are both also very fortunate that we have partners that are like that as well. And actually, anecdotally, my husband used to be a babysitter.
Yeah. Oh, really?
That's right.
So, right. So it's, I think like having partners that you can kind of like work together on breaking that stereotype, I think is very helpful. And I think part of a step that our listeners can do to kind of make that step of involvement once they recognize they're part of that conditioning is start having that conversation with their partner, start at home, start working there. And I think as you do that, your kids are going to observe it. And then that circle just spreads out more, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think for one thing, like a lot of women come to me and say, where do I start with this conversation? And one, I hate that it's on the woman to have to do this, but it's an unfortunate.
But they're the ones suffering, right?
But I think men will tolerate some level of permanent unhappiness as tolerable, and women won't do that anymore. But I think, the one thing I always tell people, your very first hurdle is your husband. If you don't have a husband who is willing to listen, who is open to hearing about your needs and allowing you safety and bringing those concerns and wants and needs and validation to him, that's your barrier. You're not going to get any further than that. And once your husband and wife, that's an unfortunate thing. You're kind of locked in there unless you can get some therapy for individual or couples counseling. But it starts even before, I tell women before you're married, these are the things, these are the conversations you need to be having. These are the things you need to be looking for. And even that's not, foolproof. But it is something that
great advice, though.
You gotta think about.
No, it's so true. I mean, for us to even have, like, our husbands have been supportive to allow us this ability to podcast for a few hours every month and then do all this other extra things. And now we're trying new hobbies as part of this process. And that's only because we have supportive husbands and, they have their hobbies. We have ours now. And, we're truly finding that creating that self-care time allows us to better take care of our families, like you said, and be better women in all aspects of our lives. And it's just been really positive for us, just in so many ways. Yeah.
Well, I think because like to the overall tone of it is it can't just be all on the woman to find that time to get that self-care. Because like you pointed out, like if your husband is somebody who has like those really long extending hobbies like golf and hunting, like they're out for hours, and it's hard to find within your already busy schedule time where you as a mom could plug yourself into that pipeline of that self-care time. So like
if you're working Monday through Friday and then they're gone all day Saturday, where's your time
right? So like if you have that conversation, maybe your husband just isn't aware, right? Like just plug it into their brain, like get them just to start seeing that and then having that conversation and work together to get there, right? I think you would agree that that's a really good step. I think another thing that you mentioned in your account that I thought was really interesting is I see that you get a lot of comments about how it's selfish of women to want this kind of time. And I really don't like that word.
We don't.
At all, because I don't think it's selfish to want something that our partners are warranted without question. And so within our podcast, we've tried to keep the word selfish, but then like change the positivity of it by calling it positive selfish. How do you feel that using the word selfish plays in describing hobbies and self-care time?
I think we have given the term selfish for women. I think the patriarchy and men really like to use that manipulatory way to make us feel bad. And just like I get called a bitter, angry woman all the time, I am bitter. There's nothing wrong with being bitter if you were a woman and you understood what we go through day in and day out, and we have gone through for centuries. I think you'd be bitter too. So I kind of, I own that word. I am bitter. You're a yapper. I am a yapper. Like I'm going to take that. You're not going to use that against me. If I don't allow you to use that negatively towards me, it loses its power. I advocate for women to be selfish. It's okay to be selfish. You need, I don't know why society feels like mom's world has to change, all the time. We hear oh, it's great that dad's going back to work, but then we call women selfish when they want to go back and continue to accelerate in their careers and their professional advancements. So we have to get rid of that double standard. And a lot of that comes when women take that power back and we own that word, like, and it's okay. And we normalize it among other women, because sometimes as women, we can be kind of our biggest competitors and our biggest downfall. And if we all get on the same page of, yes,
it's okay for us to be that way, then
I think it kind of loses the power that people hold against it.
Yeah,
I agree.
Definitely.
I think you're right. Like taking that, and I don't think we even realized that we were doing that when we initially created that positive selfish, by owning that word. And I think there's a lot of empowerment in that, and, which is great that we pulled you in, because I mean, that's just your thing. That's your specialty, right? So thank you for that. But I mean, you're right. It's taking that word and making it our own and putting that positive with the pun spin on it, I think helps.
I mean, we can both relate to that. We were both in a place in our lives with our careers. We had pretty much expended all of our energy. I mean, nothing left to give to ourselves. And, you know, this is part of our process of taking that time back. So we can 100% relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any ideas of, have you considered like starting any hobbies outside of your social media? I know you said you don't really feel like you have the time. Is there anything that interests you other than...
Oh, God. Actually, I'm going to start volunteering at the Women's Domestic Violence Shelter, Friends of Gates. I don't know if you've seen the show Made on Netflix, but I watched it recently.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
And it was pretty life-altering for me, just given the things that I'm already passionate about and the things that I already talk about. But I was like, you know what, I think that this is something that's really important for me, and doing any sort of mental health or women's advocacy is something that I'm just naturally drawn toward and passionate about. And I think I can help with that. And my friend and I have actually started, we call it a podcast, but we're not on we're not streaming on podcasts. we called it like a YouTube content series. So we started that as well, as it's kind of like an arm of, what I do already. But
great.
Yeah, definitely volunteering.
Where do you foresee your, social media going? Do you have any plans for the future?
I don't. I am just along for the ride.
Surviving right now.
A lot of times, I feel like I'm surviving.
Yeah. Totally.
I don't have any when I'm just not a planner by nature. I'm more of just fly by the seat of my pants, and I just kind of see where it, where it goes. I don't want it to start feeling like it's not a hobby. Like it's something I have to do. It's just something. For 4 years now that it's been something I enjoy and I get to do.
That's amazing.
So I just try to keep it that way and kind of keep my lens on it in that way.
Yeah, that's so cool. You found something that you are that passionate about and brings you some joy.
Yeah. Absolutely. Really cool. I agree. Well, is there any type of message that you would really like to share with our audience that would really give them just like the oomph to just go out there and take that time for themselves to prioritize self-care?
I think just that you deserve it, and you're allowed to be something other than a mom and a wife. And you were somebody before that, and we shouldn't have to completely let that go and forget that person. We are allowed to be people and have roles outside of being a mom and being a wife. And don't let anybody convince you, society or otherwise, that you're selfish for wanting more out of your life. I think we can really get into the nitty-gritty of believing that message, because we've heard it from all angles since we were young girls, that your main goal in life is to get married and have kids and find a good man. And if that doesn't look like it for you, if you're not married yet, think about that. Consider it. There's so many options out there. And if you are, start putting yourself first, because I think when women do that, their entire family will ultimately benefit. It might not seem like that in the beginning. You're going to feel like it's a little bit selfish, but again, we're back to that. Own that selfishness. It's okay to be selfish. Everybody and your children will benefit because of your selfishness.
I love that. That was well said.
Yeah, it was very well said. And I agree with that, because I feel like I even recognize it in my own home. Me, taking that time for myself, I can feel like there's a shift in the energy within my own home. Absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
I feel it.
Me too.
I felt like you were talking directly to me. I felt seen by that message. I was like, keep talking to me.
No, we love your message and what you're all about. So thank you for sharing with us. Is there anything you'd like to promote? Any links you want us to add? Or
you can can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Abby Eckel. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
I love it.
Thank
I so
you.
appreciate
Yeah.
you being on the show with us today. You were a delight to talk to, honestly.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank
Of
you.
course. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to The Art of Hobbiness. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. And for more Erin and Tam fun, be sure to follow us on all socials for behind the scenes footage on our journey to find hobbiness.